it's a curious coincidence in a certain way, my following senator from Canada here, although I'm not a senator. As Brianna named, my previous life was as a lawyer for the federal government, and one of those jobs happened to be for the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee back in the 1980s. At the time, the minority leader of that committee was a young senator from Delaware named Joe Biden. So if this was another occasion, I could tell you some Joe Biden stories, but that's not what I'm here for today. I left being a lawyer, as it was named, in 1985, and I would never have guessed that this would be my 32nd year teaching the Bible in churches and synagogues and universities and other places. But that transition, which I can't go in all the details of here, happened because my work as a lawyer convinced me that many of the social issues that we face, including human rights questions and the particular topic of anti-Judaism that I'm addressing briefly here today, are usually addressed in reaction to immediate incidents, and we don't often get a chance to dig into the roots and find out where do these things come from. So just as the United States now and other places are struggling with the legacy of racism, the New York Times recently came out with its 1619 project, where it went back to the very root of the first slave ship to recognize that if we want to address racism in the United States, we have to get to the root of it. And I believe the same is true here if we're going to talk about religious persecution or anti-Judaism. And first, I want to distinguish the commonly, I think, misused term anti-Semitism from the term anti-Judaism. Anti-Semitism technically would mean resistance to Semitic peoples, which would include Jews, Arabs, Palestinians, and others. And what I'm speaking of here is specifically anti-Judaism, not anti-Semitism. It has ancient roots indeed, and one of those ancient roots is Christianity. I think it's fair to say, although perhaps challenging to some, that the single biggest source of anti-Judaism historically is Christianity. Christianity was founded explicitly to be anti-Jewish, and that's a history that's often covered over. But Jesus did not start Christianity. Jesus was himself a Jew and could not have imagined that his job was to start a new religion. Christianity was invented by Platonists in the Roman Empire who used Judaism, and one could say appropriated it, to give their new movement what was necessary in the Roman Empire, which is a sense of ancient tradition. So one Jesuit writer described the Greco-Roman use of Judaism as the greatest corporate takeover in human history. For those interested, and I won't be able to stay too long because I have to teach as well today, I'd like to just hold up for a moment here the book that I wrote, let's see if I can get that on the screen properly, that I wrote in 2016 called Empire Baptized: How the Church Embraced What Jesus Rejected, the 2nd to 5th century, where I outlined the historical basis for the point I just made about Christianity being the primary source of anti-Judaism. One more specific thing I'd like to name in the little time I have left, and I also hold up another book where I was a contributor among many, this book called Jesus Wasn't Killed by the Jews, and you can see there with my finger over it. The editor is John Sweeney, who's a convert to Catholicism, and his wife is a rabbi. So it was a very ecumenical interfaith exercise. And that title, which one might imagine wouldn't be required in 2020 to name the fact that the Roman Empire killed Jesus and not the Jews, remains necessary. When I started my first day of the quarter at Seattle University yesterday, one of the questions I give students to think about is, what is the Bible? And they come from many different backgrounds, from many different countries, but almost uniformly they start with the Bible as a book for Christians. And I ask them, at least rhetorically, what about for the Jews who wrote it? And they're often flummoxed, because the Jews in their mind have been completely erased from biblical history, and that's a function of historical Christianity condemning the Jews for not receiving Jesus as the Messiah. One practical thing I'd like to offer in the brief few moments I have left. In my essay in this book, one of the arguments I'd like to make as a basis for beginning to break that cycle is translation. In almost every English Bible, Jesus' opponents are described as the Jews. But the Greek word that's translated Jews is Iudaioi, I-O-U-D-A-I-O-I, and it literally means Judeans. It doesn't mean Jews then or now as a religious group. It means people geographically from the place of Judea, where Jerusalem was and is, who resisted Jesus by collaborating with the Romans. So if as people read passages from the New Testament that refer to Jews, if you could try to just keep in your mind and replace, if you can, Judeans, who we don't know any of today. And so therefore, whatever the role the Judeans were in the first century, that can't be continued to persecution of Judeans today because nobody identifies as that. So human rights are indeed worth the fight. Thank you for the time, and thank you for doing this forum today.